Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome to Optima Presents. And we're so pleased to have so many people joining us. I know we have a lot of people who are planning to join us on the Zoom or who might be listening back to the recording or the podcast. And it's lovely to have you with your cameras on if you're able to do so. I'm Georgina Sturmer. I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm one of the course tutors at Optima, where we offer training, CPD, and retreats for therapists, which are all grounded in attachment theory. And I'm really excited to be here with Josh Fletcher this evening. So, Josh is a psychotherapist, he's an author, he's a podcaster, and he's often better known online as Anxiety Josh. Josh has written a number of books on anxiety, and a couple of years ago, he published And How Does That Make You Feel? Now, this is a book that really took us on a journey through his world as a therapist, understanding what really happens inside him when he sees his clients, but also what makes him tick as a therapist. And it struck a chord with so many psychotherapists and counsellors. He introduced us to his inner world, which is staffed by different voices, including compassion, empathy, detective, critic, irreverence, and saviour. And I'm sure that many of us recognise these voices from our own work. And so we're here tonight partly because next week his new book is out. I've been lucky enough to read a copy and it's brilliant. It's called Same Time Next Week, and it takes us on a similar journey to his other book, but with a really new and expanded view of the world. And if you pre-order the book, then you can visit Josh's website for instructions on how to claim a pre-order bonus gift. So for tonight, we're going to be hearing from Josh and then we'll be having a Q&A session. We've had a few questions that were sent over in advance, but we'll also be opening things up later for your questions too. So, Josh, it's over to you. Do you want to start off by just telling us a bit about yourself and what's brought you here, what's brought us here tonight?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for spending your evening listening to me talk nonsense about therapy. I really appreciate it. And thank you for that introduction, Georgina. It's very difficult hearing someone describe uh, you to other people. So I feel like, okay. But it was very flattering. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Joshua Fletcher. I'm a psychotherapist who my niche is anxiety and anxiety disorders. So a lot of you are trained in attachment and things like that. You'll know way more than I do about attachment. I do work with it a bit in my practice, but it's mostly, I work with people that often come to the therapy room with anxiety disorders. So, like panic attacks, agoraphobia, intrusive thoughts, OCD, health anxiety, and monophobia, lots, all these things. Basically, a lot of it is a fear of fear. I became a therapist, decided to become a therapist many years ago because I was a teacher in a pupil referral unit for kids who couldn't access mainstream education due to their behavior or neurodivergence or for many reasons. And whilst I was working there, I started to develop an interest in psychology, the psychology of the developmental psychology, the psychology of anxiety, etc. And whilst I was there, and I was the head of behavior in the pupil referral unit, and whilst I was there, some tricky things happened actually. If any of you have read my previous book, it was while I was there, my younger brother became very unwell, and so I became like a carer, a full-time carer for my brother. As well as working in a pupil referral unit, so they're very long days. And whilst all that was going on, my stress jug filled up and filled up, and then one day I had a panic attack, nervous breakdown, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I was really unwell. I developed symptoms like of dissociation. If any of you have ever had dissociation, have any of you ever had dissociation? It's fun. DPDR. It's really fun. If you don't feel like you're in the room, you feel like I don't know, you just opened up the matrix and broken reality. And it's really weird when you're just making a cup of tea in a kitchen and that occurs. I had that. My heart started racing. I was having like really racing thoughts that you can't even like stop and observe a single one. 'Cause yeah, and I retreated back to my house to get better. Obviously I wasn't very well at the time. And I was there for several months. And then I developed agoraphobia, couldn't leave the house, really unwell, really anxious, panic attacks after panic attacks, fearing panic attacks, hoping I'd never have one again. And yeah, I was in a really tricky place. Um, I discovered the works of one of my heroes, Dr. Claire Weeks. Read a few cool books on the subject by guys called Paul David and another one of my heroes, Sally Winston. And I started to become a nerd about anxiety and anxiety disorders. I really, really got into it. And I started to understand my own brain. So understanding my own brain, why I was here, why this was happening. And through that psychoeducation and compassion, I developed a love for studying anxiety. So after that, before I trained to be a therapist, I wanted to kind of have a side project to write whilst I was looking after my brother and stuff like that. So I wrote a book many years ago called Panicking About Panic and just self-published it and threw it out there into the ether. And I came back to it like a few months later and it had sold like so many copies and people saying it resonated with them and they've never heard anxiety explained that way. And I was like, that's really interesting. Obviously, my inner teacher was working there. I was teaching something about anxiety that people kind of hadn't heard of before or heard it put that way. Um, and then I thought, well, that's done well. Well, okay, I'll consider maybe that. How can I integrate into that into my career? I went to do my teacher training after working in the pupil referral unit. And then at that time, oh yeah, and I was studying to be a teacher in the school and love that. I'm not a fan of somatic therapy. I'm not a fan of, I don't, there's no evidence for it. I throw it out there. Therapists want me hung, dried, and cauterized about, oh, it's all in your body, it's all in your body. To which I say at these conferences, then how would you work with a paraplegic, paralyzed client who is still as human as you and I, who thinks and feels? Are you telling them that their trauma is stuck in their body? No, it's about a lot of it's about feeling. I would say I don't do any of that here. Like sometimes, don't get me wrong, I'll say like I'm noticing your hands on your chest, or I'm noticing that when you put a load of adrenaline and cortisol through someone's body, it takes its toll. Your muscles tense up, and when you're anxious every day, your muscles are tense, your posture's poor, you do all these things, and yeah, that can show up as signs in your body. That 100%. I would work with people where they're at, but I would challenge the notion of stuff and of like it's a difficult one because if it works for the client and it's helping them, that's fine. For me, I've got OCD. So when I was training, I was told that I have body trauma trapped in my body, and therefore my OCD misinterpreted that as I am contaminated. So I went through compulsively years of breath work, doing all these things. It made me so unwell. I started my therapy training a very happy person and left miserable because I was convinced, almost systematically gaslit into thinking that trauma is in my body and I need to do the work. I really, really kind of passionate about how did you feel before training, and if you feel worse at the end of it, is that progress? I don't know. You meet the client where they're at. You know, it's the somatic stuff. Peter Levine, Gabor Mate, Bess Van der Kolk, they write these books. They resonate with a lot of people. They're not actually grounded in proven empirical evidence, and that's all I'll say on the matter.
And I guess as therapists, it's for us to read what we want to read, to take what we're going to take, and to figure out what works for us and our clients. And actually, a lot of that is if it has resonated with you personally, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If something works for you or whatever, for your client, that's all that matters, you know. But I'd always say, like, there's no one size. Listen to what your client wants. My favorite question as a therapist is, and what would you like to get from therapy now? We've had a few sessions. What do you think we work on next?
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? And so there was a question that was coming to me because I was just thinking about in the book, you talk about wellness culture, which you've talked about already a lot this evening, and I can see that big smile on your face to indicate something there, Josh. But I'm thinking about particularly about sleep. So there's some stuff in the book about wellness influences and sleep, and I wonder if you'd like to share a bit more about those topics for us.
There's a chapter in Same Time Next Week where I'm invited to a sleep wellness conference. I was never invited back again. That often happens to me. People come to me as a therapist and I get invited to these wellness things, and I'm not invited back. I am not invited back to Fern Cotton's Happy Place Festival ever again.
You
Either.
do.
Yeah. It's it's weird. I sold out all my talks. It was really lovely, and everyone loved it. But no, I was blacklisted because I stood there and said, "Be careful of the commodification of your feelings, because there's money in it." And then just did a slight gesture of the whole festival. Yeah, that got back to Fern Cotton. She didn't like that. I The sleep stuff is interesting. Like as human beings, it's something we've done for thousands of years. It's one of those things where you sleep when you leave it alone. When you start mauling with sleep and trying to perfect it, trying to trying to optimize something that is best left alone, you can end up in circles. Not helped by that Matthew Walker book. So again, I'm in the OCD world. So the amount of clients I've had over the years, like, oh my God, I'm not getting enough sleep. Oh my God, I'm making myself ill. Oh my God, this is so bad. And to which my often response is, it doesn't matter. You know, you'll sleep when you'll stop ruminating, fixing, pushing it. Allow yourself to do something that your body is masterful at when left to its own devices. And there's a lot of that stuff, you know, books on breathing. Why do we need a book on breathing? You did it as a 3-year-old. You had a nap in the nursery, and you breathe just fine. You don't need a book as an adult to teach you how to breathe. You know, and it's stuff like that. Where there's a vulnerability, there is something to fix, and that's again, it's a ranty book. Yeah, don't get me wrong. You can catch yourself holding your breath. I do sometimes. I'm like, oh, I've been holding my breath, and that's it. Then I just remind myself to breathe. That's it. It doesn't need a big thing. Just like, okay, oh, must be stressed. All right, all right. And I say it to my clients, you've held your breath there a bit. You want to breathe a bit? Yeah, all right, cool. Right, we're back in the room. You know, but yeah, this optimization of stuff is gut biomes, second brains, all this stuff. And yet there's all this wealth of information out there about how to optimize yourself and be well. But look at the stats. Depression is rising, anxiety is rising. If these things were actually helpful, the stats would be going down. They're not. And if you think about it, and I don't know if it's, I say this to therapists as well. If you wake up and optimize yourself every single day, here's what I'm going to do to be better, to feel better. I'm going to be better now. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this in my routine. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. If you say that to yourself 12, 15 times a day, that's 12, 15 times a day you're signaling to your brain that your default self is not good enough. You know, so I often teach people to be a bit lazy and enjoy who they are when they're not doing all these optimizing things. A lot of my therapy is kind of considering and reflecting on what you're doing now. And I say that not just to clients, but to my therapy friends as well. Like, you're doing well. Wherever you are now as a therapist, you're doing well. The fact that you want to do such a really altruistic, beautiful profession, take a moment today to sit down and be like, that's really lovely. That's a reflection of who I am as a person, rather than I need to do 15 more CPDs and I need to do this, I need to get my level 10 and I need to do all this and I need to do all that so I can be worthy. Just take a second now. You're doing this. You're here now. You're spending. It's 20 to 8 at night and you're here bettering yourself. You don't even have to be here listening to me. That deserves a pat on the back. Like, well done. I'd see you as a therapist any day. And that's what I talk about in the book. One of the clients in my book is called Miriam, obviously fictionalized and amalgamation of different experiences. But there's 4 different characters in the book, and Miriam is one of my favorites. And she is a trainee therapist who is a current sex worker and an OnlyFans model. And it begs the question, who gets to be a therapist? And one of my favorite chapters in the book is, who gets to be a therapist? And I think anyone who wants to be. And I think it's really, really important. So, and then I bang on and pontificate about self doubt and all that stuff. But yeah, If you're a therapist now who has self-doubt, don't ever lose it, please. Don't ever lose self-doubt. I have self-doubt now. I've been a therapist 11 years. I still have self-doubt with every client because it's what makes you good. It makes you better, holds you accountable. You're always striving, but like you don't want to be that therapist that has 100 certificates in their wall and pretends they've completed therapy and knows everything. No, you lose it then. So if you've got self-doubt now, know that's a good thing. It's you're not an imposter.
And I think that will resonate a lot with us. I think that that sense of I've got to keep going, I've got to get somewhere, I've got to try to get to the top of this kind of imaginary ladder. And so it's actually quite refreshing to have a character in the book who is a trainee therapist to have this conversation going on about, well, actually, what do we need to be as therapists? And there's also a character in the new book who is the supervisor. And I guess for us as therapists, that's quite unusual, isn't it, to have that presence in the book? And so I wondered if you want to tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So I introduced Gail, my supervisor. She's an amalgamation of all my supervisors over the years, all the good bits. Um, the last book did really well, but the main feedback I got was, "Can you introduce your supervisor?" I was like, "Fine, I'll do that." And the book starts with me. I've taken a long time out of therapy from because of compassion fatigue, which you will all get. It doesn't make you a bad person. You will wake up one day and think, I don't give. My father became unwell with motor neuron disease, which is really a horrible disease. And I lost my brother and I lost my dad. And I just had this sudden realization that whatever I do for work, I want it to be meaningful and I want to have some kind of purpose. So I trained to be a therapist. I went against all imposter syndrome. Applied for my master's to be in counseling psychology to be a therapist. Um, and yeah, it's something that I managed to do. And I studied that at Keele University. Then I think COVID hit. Yeah, COVID hit. And then I thought, well, what can I do during this? So I started to provide education, psychoeducation about anxiety disorders on Instagram and stuff, and that really blew up. And then I wrote a few more books and self-help books. And then I got to a stage of, well, I wonder if I could actually like publish a book about what it is to be a therapist because I love it. I love being a therapist. I've got some trainee therapists here, and I love being a therapist. And I wanted to write a book on what it's like to not be a perfect therapist, to actually show people what it's like to be a therapist. I think when a lot of people are training it brings up lots of feelings of self-doubt and stuff. So I just wanted to bring that up. And I wanted to show people how I work with anxiety. So I wrote, and how does that make you feel? Which did really well. I was really, really happy with that. And now we're here because I wrote a follow-up to that called Same Time Next Week, which is working with anxiety in the modern world. And I think Georgina's going to, talk to me about that in a bit. Because, anxiety's always been here. It's been here. We're human. It's a human thing. But it's particularly interesting and prominent in the modern world and how it shows up in an age of optimization, social media, AI therapists. And I just thought I'd have a write about it. It's a celebration of being human, celebration of our flaws, a celebration of being present. And yeah, that's where I'm at now. And I really appreciate being able to do stuff like this. Never take it for granted. So thank you for all coming down and spending the evening to listen to me wax lyrical about it. And
Thank you, Josh. And I think that will resonate with so many of us who are here, who are maybe already counselors and psychotherapists who are in our training, this idea of wanting to do something that feels really purposeful. And there's something you talk about in the book about how we are all flawed masterpieces, which I really loved about us as people. But thinking about what that looks like in a world where things that are flawless are being thrown at us every moment. So you talk a lot in the book about, I suppose, two really important things that are happening in the world right now, AI, the rise of AI, and social media. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about, I suppose, how you see that impacting on us and on therapists in the world that we live in now.
yeah, so the way I see everything now is that having human therapists is more important than ever. It's one of the themes I talk about in the book. Um, we're in a we're in a world where instant gratification. It's the death of delayed gratification. You can talk about, you can order something from Amazon in the morning, get it by the afternoon. You can skip the cinema and just watch something on your television. You can pretty much have answers straight away. If you want know how to fix your dishwasher, you put it into Chat GPT or whatever, and it's always there. It's there. Everything's instant, instant, instant. Backed up by social media. Interestingly, there's a study, a huge meta-analysis of Insta therapy, where I think it's either 56 or 61, I can't remember the number, 56 or 61% of mental health information you hear online is misinformation, it's false, it's not based on anything. So the majority of what you see online that's popular is misinformation. And I just find that fascinating. And we as therapists have got to be in that world, operate it. We're also part of that world, but also got to understand that our clients are there doing that. Um, I wrote this as an ode to kind of therapists with self-doubt who feel a bit kind of lost, being in a world where like there is all that there. I don't know how many of you work with clients and they're like, oh, I asked ChatGPT this, or I asked this, that, and I asked that. And I sit there and go like, okay, right. Um, and they often say like, oh, it made me feel better. Yeah. And one of the themes of my book is if something makes you feel better immediately, is that a good thing? A lot of what I'd like to do is sitting with all feelings, and all feelings are welcome. And I think where it's particularly relevant for therapists is that we forget that all feelings are welcome. Sometimes you've got to sit with shit feelings, like grief, anger, irritation, and stuff, because when all feelings are welcome, you're more likely to have the feelings that you like, But we're in a world of regulating. We have to self-regulate, whatever that means. That's not all feelings are welcome. We have to do all these things. Instant culture. If you're anxious, it means that you have to fix it. It means you're doing something wrong. And yeah, I'm surrounded by it. And I've to the point where I actually have to have a nice gap away from social media. Despite having a big platform, I very rarely open it now because it is enraging with what you see. And I just feel like this is the book that kind of highlights that, particularly for therapists. It's like, it's okay. Like your job is way more important now, more than ever, to hold space and to hold feelings that perhaps people don't like.
And that's so important, isn't it? This sense that actually it's okay to sit with discomfort. And that's a big part of our job, even if we don't always feel comfortable doing it. And I was really curious because in the book, you talk a bit about you or the main character, or you, who is the main character, engaging with AI as a therapist or as someone who gives you advice. It almost sounded like you're kind of on a bit of a mission to see, well, if my clients are doing this, why don't I give it a go? And I guess I was really interested to find out, whether or not that was something that you felt all therapists should give a try, or how that sits with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just very honest in my books. I'm a very flawed human being myself. I don't pretend to have everything worked out. I'm not Mel Robbins. I'm very honest with who I am and the stuff like that. I also have OCD. I don't know if anyone else in here has OCD or struggles with intrusive thoughts. Does anyone else struggle with intrusive thought? I do. Yeah, OCD stuff like that. And yeah, in the book, there's these little chapters where I get caught into talking to a therapy AI bot because it's the thing that can talk to you at 2 a.m. when no one else is there, except it's not talking to you. It tells you what you want to hear, and I show the dangers of people with OCD talking to something that can give you an instant dopamine boost. In the moment, it feels great. And I argue with therapists a lot. They're like, yeah, but if it works, and then I say, well, what does it works mean? Like, I feel like shit. I can go and drink 5 beers. That'll work. I don't feel bad anymore. I've had 5 beers. Well done, me. But that's not working. That's getting rid of a feeling that I should have sat with, and I've replaced it with something else. Um, I do talk in the book about um, I get a bit obsessed with AI and start talking about it, and I show you how much of a, what's the word, hypocrite I am. So like, yeah, I'm a therapist, and you shouldn't do that, and we should work on our distress tolerance because that's the cornerstone of my practice, distress tolerance. You know, we're told often that if you're in distress or feeling feelings that aren't positive, it's somehow your fault and you're not doing the right thing. And that's something I often pontificate to, all the time, whether social media or working with clients. And but then I also show the hypocritical nature of me dealing with grief and confiding into an AI bot about my grief and how kind of messed up that becomes. Um, just to display to people that everyone is human and everyone can do it. Um, yeah, there's no like direct message, do this, don't do this, but I'm just showing you how it can hurt people, particularly who are obsessive compulsive.
And so on that showing of yourself in your books, on your social media, I'm really interested in, when we learn to be therapists, we learn about self-disclosure, don't we? And we kind of learn, when we're learning to pass our driving test and we're doing therapy 101, we learn that, we don't give anything away. We don't tell anyone anything about ourselves. And then we train and we learn and we qualify, and actually we realize that self-disclosure is a personal decision as a therapist. Sometimes it can be really relational. There's something about sharing ourselves that make us feel human in the eyes of our clients. What's it like for you to have so much of your insides out there for clients or other people to see and to know about?
Um, it's been great, to be honest. I don't know why we're trained to do that. I think it's quite elitist. If you want someone to open up, they won't open up in an unhealthy power dynamic. People open up when they feel disarmed,
Mm.
particularly, and I work with a lot of men as well, and it's not just men, but men will open up when they feel disarmed. But if you're there holding cards to your chest, but holding people, now don't get me wrong, I'm not going to therapy saying, here's all my traumas and all this. No, it's not about me. But publicly, yeah, I'll show people I'm flawed because I think it challenges the archetype of therapists know all the answers. You're more likely to open up to someone who is willing to kind of join you on the ledge, to join you on these places, to sit in discomfort, particularly if you're working with people pleasers, if you're working with people that don't feel safe in their relationships. A lot of you work in attachment, so I think it's even more important to do that. As long as you do it professionally,
Mm.
I call it tasteful self-disclosure. Like if you think I do it publicly, it's helped me as a therapist. I don't talk about me in sessions, but I show people that I'm willing, I practice what I preach. This does work. I live a very happy, content life now. Very selective with it, though. I don't share everything. There's some things that are personal to me that remain personal to me, and no one will know about that. But selective with stuff like grief and identity stuff and being a therapist that is full of self-doubt, even still now. Um, I think that's wonderful. I don't know why we're trained to like keep everything to yourself. Yet obviously stay in your client's frame of reference. I get very Rogerian about it. Like don't ever leave your client's frame of reference. But if a client ever asks me something like, "Oh, have you ever had a panic attack?" Yeah, yeah, I have. Yeah, this is why. I think that's an old archetypal stereotype where the therapist knows everything and the person is going for the answers. And I don't think that's healthy, and particularly if you're specializing in attachment. The last thing you want to do is someone to get attached to a kind of pedestaled authority figure who doesn't show their own emotions, might even re-emerge patterns, So yeah, don't get me wrong. I've heard horror stories of therapists just over disclosing and making it about them. Don't do that. Don't be a knob. But in general, if you can do it tastefully and it's part of the therapeutic relationship, then definitely I do that. I don't find it difficult at all. No, like I've only received like positive stuff from it,
Yeah.
which I like. Yeah, mostly positive stuff. Yeah.
You can tell us about the rest later. But I really like that idea of tasteful disclosure, this idea of actually we can all make the right decisions about what's right for our client. And I guess for us, when we're thinking about it from an attachment perspective, we're thinking about how can I offer my client that secure base that they need so they can go out and explore the world and take risks with me in therapy? And how can I offer them that safe haven so that they can come back to me? And actually, if they feel like I am a flawed human being too, because we all are, then that's going to build a relationship more safely, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I do you want to hear a bit about how I work with anxiety and attachment?
Yeah.
Um, I'm not as trained as you guys. It's not my niche, but when it does come up in my therapy practice through the lens of anxiety, I always talk about fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Everyone knows the fight response. You're angry, irritable. You want to attack. You want to push people away. You want to be very explosive. Um, you've got the flight response, which is me, which is, when I'm really anxious, I want to run away. I want to hide, and I will do. I'll push loved ones in the way to protect my own safety. I won't really, but stuff like that. And that's me. Then you got the freeze response. You're a freezer when you have a wonderful compartment for vegetables and making ice cubes. You're a freezer when you just stop in the face of something and you're like, oof, like I'm frozen. I don't really know what to do. I'm frozen in indecision. And then you got fawn, and a lot of kind of what I comes up in my practice is the fawn response, which is the people pleasing response, which is deep. It's part of our brains that are not even part of our cognitive brains. And it's even though it's part of anxiety and the overall threat response, the fawn response, I often pick up on that in my practice, and that usually affects a lot of attachment. So you're a people pleaser when you say yes when you want to say no. You're constantly ruminating about social interactions, either before, during, or after, and giving it an analysis. You're not really engaged in the conversation. You're engaged in threat monitoring of people's facial expressions, their tone, misinterpreting their tone, constantly scanning for signs that the attachment is secure. Reassurance seeking, constantly checking in for reassurance, your own reassurance because you're anxious. Rereading emails, rewriting emails, double, triple checking what you say, what you write. Uh, you're a people pleaser when you're that kind of person who thinks they can pick up on someone's mood with the back towards the door and someone walks in and, oh, are they in a mood? What's wrong with them? Well, actually, no. You've seen that through the lens of fawning. It's not necessarily what's happened. They might have just stumbled through the door. They might have just lost their footing, and that comes up quite a lot. And I look at the fawn response a lot, particularly how it's been conditioned over years. So the amygdala stores its own memories, the threat response and anxiety, and it's usually conditioned either directly through, direct not nice things, or indirectly, where, in order to have worth and attention and secure attachment from my loved ones or school or the environment I'm in, I looked around to people to see what they're doing and I try to copy what they're doing in order for me to feel a bit more secure. That's how I work with it through the lens of the fawn response. Like I said, it's limited for what I do as an anxiety therapist. But when it does come up, and what you said there, Georgina, I will often do exposure therapy
Yeah.
for attachment stuff. So, like, go and say something what you mean. Go and say your opinion. No, no, I don't want to say that. No. Why not try saying no? Oh, no, 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 no. Try saying no, you know, and we have all these little exposures that we do, challenges. But the challenge isn't the saying no and it's not doing the difficult thing. It's being with the feelings after you've done it. And that's and that rewires the threat response because the anxiety learns from experiential learning. It doesn't learn from just rationalizing at home. It learns through experience. And the amygdala is the same. It only learns through experience. It doesn't learn through sitting down with a pen and paper.
Yeah, and we often talk about it in attachment terms, in terms of rewiring our neural pathways. So Jo, who's here tonight, has this lovely analogy that she always talks about how, if you imagine that inside your brain, you've got like a wood. a forest full of trees, and you've got these pathways that are really well trodden, and they take you down those responses that you're really used to, your freeze or your fawn or whatever it is that you do. Actually, you absolutely can change those pathways, but it might take a little bit of work. You might have to get your axe out, you might have to chop down a few trees, you might have to try and go a different way. But it's trying out those things, isn't it? Like in therapy with us, where we can take risks or we can think about what would it be like for you to do this instead of that. Oh, that sounds like that feels a bit uncomfortable. Let's play that back. Let's think about that there. Yeah, so it's really interesting to just, I suppose, have a bit of a knowledge about how the brain works. And it sounds like that's what you do with your clients and through the podcast and everything else that you do.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I use the field, similar an analogy. I use the field of tall grass. You know, you walk across a field of tall grass, get to the end, turn around. What do you see? You see in the grass that you've trampled down. Go back a week later, it's grown back. You've done nothing. Do something once. You know, it's brave, but there's no point just doing it once. Do it over and over again. But when you walk over the field of tall grass over and over again, you start to create a more kind of rigid path, to the point where you could literally rewire your brain. You could rewire your default language if you tried hard enough.
Yeah,
You know,
quite incredible, isn't
through
it?
repetition and effort. Yeah, absolutely. But a lot of kind of anxiety is like doing it willingly with all feelings, because often we're designed to avoid discomfort, but a lot of anxiety is a false alarm, and we need to teach the brain it's a false alarm by challenging its hypothesis and feeling uncomfortable.
And I guess that's why it's so important to do this work in relationship, isn't it? Actually working with someone and figuring things out and having that space to try things out. I'm just thinking, Josh, I've got a few questions that were sent in before this evening, and we also wanted to open things up so that if you're here and you've got a question that you want to ask, I think there should be a function where you can raise your hand. So if you've got a question, then raise your hand, and we will hopefully manage to get to you. But maybe I'll start off with this one that came in, which is what daily routines are important to support people with anxiety disorder?
You got to be careful, because one of my mottos of working with anxiety disorders is that you are the coping technique. You must get the credit for tolerating discomfort. If you have a routine and that makes you feel good, and then you inadvertently give the credit for not feeling anxiety to that routine, what happens when you go on holiday? What happens when something bad happens? What if happens if a loved one's in the hospital? What happens if you break your leg? What happens if you can't access that routine? So, yes, routine's okay. I'm autistic, so I need some kind of routine. But I also know, and as I teach, is that if that routine is broken, that is also okay. You know, how much are we giving credit to a rigid routine, or giving credit to tolerating discomfort to something that is external from us? I often say this as well. I don't want this interpreted the wrong way, but we're adults. We know what's good for us. We know exercise is good for us. We know eating KFC is every day is probably not going to be great for you. We don't need to be infantilized. We know what's good and what's not. I think it's a really good question. It's that whatever works for you. If you're getting up at 5:30 a.m. and doing ice baths and box breathing and whatever because you're trying to emulate wellness, I would question, as are you doing that for you, or are you doing that because you don't like feelings that you want to get rid of? If it's for you and you like getting up at 5:30 a.m. and doing ice baths, one, fair play, you're nuts. And two, whatever, you can do those things. That's okay. I certainly don't do that. Have some flexibility in those things, because often when you miss the routine, it ends up making you feel more anxious, and this inner critic comes out like you've missed your routine, you've not gone to the gym, so it kind of can backfire. So if you're anxious and you've got an anxiety disorder, I wouldn't. For me, I don't think routines are that important. I think it's more the flexibility in your attention that's important.
Mm. Yeah,
It's just my opinion. Like,
yeah, but I think it makes sense, doesn't it? Actually thinking about, well, what's going to work for me and what's going to happen if that isn't available? Am I still going to cope anyway? Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, no, absolutely. Like I write about it a lot in the main message of the book is it's okay to be with difficult feelings. We're forgetting that. A lot of society is forgetting that. What do I
Yeah.
do? I sit in my practice and someone will have a full-on panic attack and they're like, Josh, what do I do? I'm like, no, let's just chat. They're like, but what do I do? Do I box breathe? Do I get an ice pack? Do I do all this stuff? I'm like, no, because this will pass. You're having a shot of adrenaline, bit of cortisol in there to spice it up. It's working its way through your bloodstream. No amount of tapping your face, standing on your head, or saying mantras are going to get rid of that out of your bloodstream. But when it passes, we're going to give you a big pat on the back and say, look how well you did at tolerating that. That's how you get rid of anxiety disorders, is like, okay, I'd rather not have an adrenaline rush in the theater or at a meal with friends. But if it does happen, then I know it will pass and I know that I'm the person that gets the credit for it passing. I think that's really important.
Yeah, so I guess there's stuff here about thinking about our bodies and our breathing and everything else that happens. And there was a question that I'm going to bring now because it kind of makes us think about it in a different way. So someone's sent in a question saying, um, imagine working with a paraplegic client who struggles to feel anything in their body. It's hard to work with them somatically or to use effective breath work or grounding techniques. What would you do?
Best question I've ever been asked about anything. And that's okay. It means you're burnt out and you're compassion fatigued. So I took some time out and had some personal stuff. And the book opens with me returning to therapy after a very long time to try it again. And it starts with Gail, the supervisor. You know, like, I don't feel ready. I don't feel ready. I don't feel ready. And she's encouraging me, like, no, you are. You can do this. And there's a lovely discussion between Gail and me as doing that. And she gives me the nudge to go and do it. And then I do it. I open my practice again. Now, I'm a anxiety disorder therapist, so it's not always in the therapy room. So my first ever, another character who was my first client after a very long break is a guy called Magnus. And he's very wealthy aristocrat who won't leave his house in the middle of Cheshire. It's a massive mansion. And they send me, who is not very working class and all that. And that's how it starts. Like, how do I therapize a young a young aristocratic man who's been absorbed in the manosphere and red pill culture? How do I get someone like that to feel feelings? And that's how the book starts. It starts with Gail and it goes into that.
Yeah, and we hear you, I guess, battling with all of these things in supervision, thinking about how do I recover from burnout, thinking about how do I cope with working with these clients, what do they need from me?
Yeah, and there's a lot of that in supervision now. They talk up to a supervisor about what's the point. You know, they've got AI, you've got all this stuff. It's making people feel better. There's some of my favorite chapters to write, actually. Like, one of the things your supervisor reminds you is that what's the one thing you can do that AI can't, other than blink, breathe, or do or dance. It's the one thing it's that you'll always do that it can't do, and it's hold silence,
Mm,
to not react, to not give an answer. AI can't do. If you message something to AI, its imperative and its coding is to, as fast as possible, respond and give you something. Your superpower as therapists is to sit there and just let something land. Like, oh, wow, that's mad. And that's a really beautiful thing. And even in my own personal therapy, when my therapist has done that, it's lovely. Like, I've said something and then she's just like allowed that to be like, be in the room.
mm,
I'm like, shit, did I just say that out loud? Uh, that's where a lot of stuff happens. And again, it's a big celebration of therapists, is what I do. And it doesn't matter if you don't say the right thing. There's loads of stuff in this book. There's stuff in my inner voices are like, why the fuck did you just say that, you idiot? Just like, yeah. And there's some stuff where I'm like, actually, that was really good. Like, it was really good therapy, Josh. You've done great. And then some stuff's just like, you idiot. Why did you say that? And that's fine. And that will always be the case. You'll always get stuff wrong. And that's fine.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so enjoyable as therapists or as supervisors or whatever we are to know that we all have those inner voices when we're sitting with a client, however it is that we're working. I've got a few more questions that people sent in, but I don't know if the hands up function is working. If anyone has a question and they want to just put it in the chat box, then please do.
It'd be cool. Let's get some questions from people here. That'd be
Yeah.
really nice.
Or you're welcome to unmute if you've got anything that you'd like to ask Josh.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Or you can not ask anything and watch me have an anxiety attack. That's fine. All feelings are welcome.
We can try just sitting in silence.
Yeah. There's no question that's too silly, or by the way, you can ask me anything. Really don't mind.
I can I ask one actually?
Yeah.
Yeah, please do.
So as I've got three youngest children, and obviously talking about the social media side of it, and how as parents and also as therapists, how do we protect our younger children from this constant, you said, this constant gratification, and they're getting such bad anxiety from them when they don't get it, and trying to withdraw them from putting time limits on. It's hard.
It's really cool that you put time limits on, and the fact that you care is great.
Mm,
I work with kids where parents don't give a shit, just like go whatever. So they're untethered completely. So first thing I'd say is well done for caring. Good social media hygiene. So time limits. Also, people don't like forget this. Google how to reset the algorithm. You can do that. You can reset your algorithm. You can do it honestly. Like if and this applies to all of you. If you stop on a mad video about something. I don't know about how kale is going to cure your gut biome and, make you never feel something you don't want to feel again. You'll start to see more and more of that. If they're doing social media, I don't know how old are they? Are they
So
quite
I've
young?
got I've got a boy who's nearly 13 who
Yeah.
is autistic as well, which makes it even worse, I think. And then I've got twin daughters who are 11, and one's got
Mm.
ADHD and gets
Yeah,
very
yeah,
fixated, so it's even more heightened.
yeah. So I would take a moment to explain a bit about them, about like
Mm,
actually social media here. It's programmed to show you what you want. You've got to be careful.
mm,
It's good to reset the algorithm stuff now and then. Share and be curious with them and be
mm,
like, well, what are you seeing? What is good here? And rather
mm,
than, doing that, be like, well, what are you interested in? So you're a bit invested in their lives. Honestly, when people say things like Instagram, TikTok, it depends on the person. Like
mm.
what you will see on your will be nothing that I see. You and I, Sarah, could load up these things, spend a whole week looking at videos, and we wouldn't see the same video.
Yeah,
So it's like
a lot.
yeah, it depends what. And I'm not anti-social media.
Mm,
I just think it's mindful what you see. Like if
mm.
it's showing you stuff that is nice, that's great. I see otter videos and videos of sausage dogs because I have a sausage
Same
dog.
here.
Yeah, and that's great. But then it depends. Like you've got a 13-year-old lad, you don't want him going down seeing videos from these dickheads online about manosphere stuff.
Mm,
You
mm,
just don't know what you're going to see, and that's what those people target. So it's good to have that algorithm reset.
mm.
The time limit stuff's cool, but and also the curiosity is like, what are you
Yeah.
seeing? What do you think about that? Do
Mm.
you want to chat about that?
Yeah, we
And
often do it together as well. Actually, I think as well we do it together to take away the kind of the that they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, excitement out of that kind of, yeah,
yeah, you're nailing it.
desensitize them.
You're nailing it. That's great.
Mm.
I'd actually say you're doing a really good job. Like
Yeah.
you're mindful of it. You're monitoring it. I mean, again, like, I wish, yeah, more people were like that. Instead, it's often a tool that it's given to kids. They go off and they're lonely and they're
Mm.
doing all these things, but they're lucky to have a mum who's kind of invested in looking after them. So yeah, I'd be like, it's cool. What you're doing is enough.
Thank you, and thank you, Sarah. Josh, we've had a question in the chat from Andy, and he says, "Hi, Josh. What's your view on being accepting of anxiety to the person who has it? There always seems pressure to have to change if you have anxious patterns."
I'd ask, what's your view on being accepting of anxiety, the person who has it? As in, like, is it a question on acceptance? So, like, you always think pressures have to change if you have anxious parents. Um,
I want
that
go on.
that that tells me that I don't know, maybe you have some people around you have commented on your anxiety, and that's where the pressures come from, or it could just be your own internal pressure. You can, if you have anxiety, it's okay. I was, if people are like putting you down for it, I'd question that. Um, oh, it's tricky. It's a nuanced one, isn't it? Um, an anxious pattern, yeah, sometimes when we are anxious, that can affect other people. We live in the real world, that's okay. As long as you're surrounded with kind of attempted empathy and understanding and compassion, that will help you to challenge anxieties that are doing things like that. When I was in the midst of my anxiety disorder, it definitely affected other people, and they're allowed to have feelings of frustration. But I would ask, where's the balance? Where's the compromise? And actually looking back, my internal critic was like, "You're a burden. You're doing this to people." And when I asked them now, they were like, "No, you weren't a burden at all. We're just trying to encourage you to do things." It just depends who's around you. I just reflect on who's around you and who's telling you what is acceptable and what's not. Without knowing more, I can't really answer that more. But from my own experiences working with clients, a lot of anxiety is affected by the people around them. If people around them are seeing your anxiety as an inconvenience for them, that's not necessarily great. Um, and then sometimes it's people who just have an internal critic. They're like, "No, you got to get rid of this. You're a therapist. You got to do that." And then I'd be like, "Whoa, let's challenge that. Let's get a bit of compassion involved."
And I wonder also if sometimes it's because the people around us or the people who love us don't really know what to do with it. And they see that we might be anxious or we might be in distress. And the only thing that they know how to do is say, oh, don't worry, calm down, which
Yeah, there's always a reaction
people
stuff.
do.
Have you tried mindfulness? Have you tried this? Have you tried tapping? Have you tried putting your head in a bowl of ice water? Have you tried this mantra? Have you tried all these things? Anxiety doesn't need a solution sometimes. I had it the other day. I had a full-on adrenaline rush, anxiety dissociative episode out with friends because it's a privilege having a book out, but it's very stressful. And sometimes I'll just dissociate because my brain's trying to look after me. And I was out with friends. I think we weren't watching the new Michael Jackson movie, which was fun. My foot stopped still tapping now. But afterwards, I was like, whoa. And everyone's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm all right. I'm dissociated and really anxious. You don't need to do anything. It will pass. Let's crack on. And they're like, okay.
Yeah, so
Like,
sometimes it's just
yeah, yeah, yeah.
communicating.
That was it. And I wasn't even thinking about it that way. But for a lot of people, it's like, oh my God, what's this? What's going on? We need to fix you. We need to do this. And I use that example as psychological discernment. Like, just like, okay, they conveyed their belief in me that I could do it. That's where a lot of it. If you keep offering solutions to people that are anxious, you're not actually conveying a belief in their ability to tolerate discomfort. And don't get me wrong, it can come from a good place, but I often say, all right, we're anxious, let's do it. Let's
Yeah,
see what you can do whilst anxious.
yeah. It's a
Really
bit.
powerful. And it teaches the brain and the amygdala loads of things. You literally rewire your brain talking about neural pathways and all that. It's great. Mm.
And so we've got time, I think, just for one more question. So I've got a message here from Arouge in the chat, and she just said, thank you so much for a wonderful talk. What have you found to be the most surprising thing while working on the book?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, I like my ranty chapters. I don't, I'm someone with horrible internal critic, imposter syndrome. I always probably will. But I finished the book, submitted it, did the edits, left it for 6 months, hated it, came back, and it got printed. Yeah, lovely, beautiful book. It got printed in, oh, I've got the blurry thing on. It just likes my face. Maybe if I use this as my face. And I read through it and I was like, some of the ranty chapters, like, actually, that's really lovely. I'm like, that's actually good, Josh. I was like, thank God, because I hated writing it. And then I was like, that's actually really good. And I was really proud of myself, particularly the chapters on who gets to be a therapist, the death of delayed gratification, um, compassion, and things like that. Yeah, I was surprised. Um, yeah, I still work with my therapist now on internalizing praise and compliments. But when I read it back, I was like, yeah, that was good. I'm proud of it. It's cool. Unless you're Barry on Goodreads, he doesn't like any of my books and goes out of his way to really go out of his way to tell me that he doesn't like my books. I think Barry has a thing for me, and he needs to kind of get a life, man. But in general, yeah, I was proud of it. I was proud of it. Yeah, that was the most common thing.
Thank you. And I really hope that Barry likes this book. I really hope that this book is the one that turns things around for
No,
him.
it's going to send him over. It's going
Yeah.
to send him over the edge. Yeah,
But
and
we'll
yeah, he'll
see.
be the first person to buy it. So there we go. It's strange. I don't know what he's projecting onto me, but it's flattering.
Well, thank you so much for this evening. I think you've given us a lot to think about, and I know that I really enjoyed the book, particularly the Ranty chapters. If you guys who are listening, if you'd like to hear more from Josh, you can find him at schoolofanxiety.com or on the Disordered podcast. And as I mentioned before, if you pre-order the book, send him a note, and he will be able to send you your pre-order.
Yeah, yeah.
Go
If you
on,
do,
Josh. That's
yeah,
it.
if you pre-order the hardback, I've been sending out the an entire intrusive thoughts book that I wrote years ago that I wasn't allowed to publish because of conflict of interest. So if you have any clients with intrusive thoughts and OCD, I did an intrusive thoughts book called Unravel Your Intrusive Thoughts, and the illustrations were done by OCD Doodles. She's amazing, and she's like a doctor up in Leeds, and she, as a side, does illustrations, and we collaborated. I made this ebook, and I sent it out. And I've also have a morning anxiety audio. So anyone who has morning anxiety, whether it's clients or even therapists, if you're someone who lies in bed and ruminates first thing in the morning, I encourage put this in your ear, and I'm like, don't do that. It's like stop ruminating. It's like, you're not going to solve your day doing that. And I've been sending them out as freebies. So if anyone kind of pre-orders the hardback, if you email me, I just send them straight back to you. And the response to the intrusive thoughts books has been really lovely, which is nice. I'm glad it's out there because I wasn't allowed to publish it. Not because it said bad or anything. It's just because I publish other books and they didn't want me to do it. So yeah, I've just been sending out as a freebie.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Josh. That's everything from us this evening. If you're here and you'd like to hear more about Optima and what we do in our attachment training, you can find out more about our courses, our CPD, our podcast, and our retreat, all at optimahealthservices.co.uk. So that's goodbye from us. I hope you have a lovely evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.